Hi, I'm Jeff, lead pastor of Northview Community Church in Abbotsford, British Columbia. And this podcast is where I get a chance to interview people about things that I'm interested in and talk about whatever I want to talk about.
Welcome to another conversation with Jeff Bucknam. I am Levi, the producer. We have a bit of a special episode for you today in light of where we are at as a church. Jeff sat down for a conversation with Mark and Karolyn Burch for this one. Mark is the candidate we will be voting to affirm as our next lead pastor at our congregational meeting on June 22nd. So we wanted to use this episode to hear from him and Karolyn about what this time of transition has been like and is like for them. We had a longer meet and greet event with the Burches a few weeks ago where they introduced themselves on a more personal level and talked about their story that you can find on our website at northview.org. But this conversation focuses more on the present and the future as Jeff, Mark, and Karolyn talk about all kinds of stuff during this time of transition. We think it'll be a really good conversation for you to listen to in light of where we are at and where we are going as a church.
Well, hello there. It is my distinct pleasure to have Mark and Karolyn Burch join me on this podcast so that we can talk to them about what in the world they're thinking about becoming part of the long litany of great names that have led Northview Community Church. Did you know that there's only three full-time non-interim lead pastors in the history of Northview? Did you know that?
Yeah, and I understand two of those were great names.
Yes. The most recent one, not so much.
Not sure about that guy.
No, and the funny thing is, I think you knew all three of them, didn't you? Can you name them? This is like naming the...
Yes, the popes.
The prime ministers, yeah.
At the beginning.
Which ones do you know them?
Yeah, well, there was a Merv Boschman back in the day, in the early days of MEI.
Yeah.
And then there was a Vern Heidebrecht.
Yes.
Who, Jeff, you didn't know this trivia. I'm sure you didn't know this trivia. Do you know where Vern was from originally, way back when Vern was a little boy?
No.
You know this trivia?
I don't know this. Where was he from?
North Dakota.
You know what? I don't know anybody else in the world from North Dakota.
Jeff, do you know where Mark Burch was born?
North Dakota?
I was born in North Dakota.
Oh, my word.
Vern and I shared a hospital room as newborns.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's all the strings are coming together, all the strands of providence. And all right, so how should we feel about a North Dakotan becoming the next lead pastor? Hey, Mark, I have a series of questions. Karolyn, thank you very much for joining us on this fine podcast. I appreciate that you've come along.
She's been waiting all week for this.
Why are you talking for her? She has her own voice.
No, I'm gonna let her talk in a few moments. I've given her a script of what she's allowed to say.
Oh, my word. Karolyn, how are you?
I'm good.
That's good. I have a series of questions here, and from what I understand, you have a few questions that you'd like to ask me. Is that right?
Questions. Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to start with my questions for you, and then at the end, you can ask your questions for me. Here's my first question. How angry are you, Mark, for me baiting and switching on you? Because as I recall, you when we hired you a few years ago, you said, how long are you going to be there? And I was like, man, forever.
Yes.
And apparently I lied to you.
Yeah, you're a liar. Yeah, you're a liar, which I'm not sure if you knew that lying is not a good thing, Jeff. But I didn't know. The four of us, Jeff and Jeannie, Mark and Karolyn, were sitting at Brodeur's Bistro, which was a step up. The first time I had lunch with you, it was Old Spaghetti Factory. So Brodeur's was a step up. That was quite good. And over that lunch, I remember asking you, so Jeff, hey, how long you thinking you're going to be here? Oh, another decade. Easily another decade.
Yeah.
That gave me great confidence in taking the assignment you were asking me to take.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? I take my cues from Dr. Bonnie Henry when it comes to time. Just 2 more weeks, Mark. Just 2 more weeks. No, you know what? The Lord in his providence, similarly actually to the whole pandemic, the Lord in his providence has changed things. It shouldn't be a surprise to any of us.
So you didn't have
happens.
This planned
No,
back in the day?
I didn't. So it wasn't
Okay.
really a bait. It was intended that we were going to be here for a long, long time. But yeah, Lord does things differently sometimes.
Yeah.
So what is I'm just both of you, I'm interested in knowing what is the best thing that you are coming into in terms of the leadership of Northview Community Church. Like, this is basically an opportunity for both of you to praise me for all the good work I've done up to this point. But that's okay, because right after this, I'm going to give you an opportunity to say what is the worst thing. So what is the best thing that you're going to come into?
Quite a long litany of praise for you here. And then I'll let my wife jump in too. So, hey, Jeff, I've said this publicly already in several settings. So I know that there's 22 people listen to this podcast. So they probably have heard me say it elsewhere. But I think what I'm excited about and what we're coming into is an incredibly healthy church. So in a similar story, if you will, 25 years ago, we were taking a call to go to Kelowna. And we inherited a very healthy church. The leaders who had gone ahead of us had left that church in a really great place. And it was a joy to just jump in and build on the shoulders of the guys who went ahead of us. And the Lord really blessed that ministry. So while we didn't anticipate pushing you out, took me 2 years to push you out. Now that you're leaving joyfully, I look at this opportunity as much similar. We're inheriting a healthy church, and you've got a lot to do with that. I know it's not all on you, Jeff, and you know that too. The Lord has used your leadership. One of the core values, strong, stable leadership at Northview, and that's genuinely true. Great staff team, a really strong bench of preachers, good solid elders who are committed to the mission and the vision. Just so many great things.
Yeah, good team of people. That's actually true. Karolyn, what do you think? Best thing?
Well, pretty much parallel with Mark. A few months ago was very impressed by, I was reading through the Gospels again, and lift up your eyes to the fields. They're white for harvest, and you're entering into the others' hard labor, and we're going to reap basically what others have sown. And I felt at that time that God was speaking directly to my heart as far as the bigger vision of it, that others have gone before us, and you'll reap what others have labored so hard for.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're really quite excited to get to know the new senior pastor as well, aren't you? Isn't that a big part of things that you're looking forward to?
Oh, yeah.
She has a lot of confidence in him.
Yeah.
I sure do.
So, okay, but now here's your chance. What is the worst thing that you're walking into? Be honest. Worst thing. Every church has got a wart. What's the wart?
Yeah, you know what? So 2 things, Jeff, I would say, because there's a ton. Honestly, I think not so much the church, this process in this timing.
Oh, yeah.
And you've gone through it as well, although the openings in the States are a little bit different. So as you were candidating, you actually got to meet with some real life people.
Yeah.
This process has been the most awkward candidating process because it's surreal. You're like, I'm sure there's a congregation represented out there in those Zoom calls and at the other end of that camera that we talk to, on Northview TV. But you're trying to imagine, these nameless faces and going, okay, this is your flock that you're going to be shepherding. So that's been like really a weird process in and of itself. Is there a negative? Jeff, you and I've talked about this. I think the challenges of the megachurch. So the strengths of the megachurch are the incredible bandwidth and this, as you talk about the giant engine the Lord has built here. So you've got great people, great resources. You can run great programs. You've got support for pretty well any venture you suggest. People are like, yes and amen. There's always a couple hundred people will jump on pretty well anything new. The downside of thousands of people is, how do you shepherd thousands of people well? How do we make sure that as much as is humanly on the shoulders of the shepherds, take responsibility for, whatever the 1,000 number is that call Northview home? How do we know they're being cared for? So I think that's something I've been praying a lot about, to say, Lord, help us. And it's not just Northview's challenge, it's any large church challenge.
Yeah.
It's going to be no different for where you're going. I mean, you guys immediately step into you came here when Northview was smaller. It grew with you. You're going to a church that's very similar size to Northview already. It will grow. How do you possibly serve thousands of people?
With a lot of help. Yes. No, that's right. And the systems and the, community groups and it's just harder. It's harder to do in a large church than it is a small church. Small churches are known for their community life. And so developing that kind of community life at a place like Northview can be a bit daunting and challenging. Because, a big chunk of the people they come for a few hours and then they go away. Especially now, and now it'll be interesting to see also how, I'm going to ask you a question in a minute about the effect of COVID on all this, but it'd be interesting to see what happens after COVID when it comes to that whole thing.
Yep, for sure.
Karolyn, there's got to be a wart.
What? A wart?
A wart, yeah. Some people think warts are good, though, I guess. But what is the thing that you are a little bit,
I think that's, again, parallel with Mark. The heart to love people and shepherd them, and yet know that you can't possibly humanly, as one person, touch all of them. I felt that way in Kelowna when the church was at its height of, if I could use the word, population.
Yeah.
But I think on that side, there's that side of my heart, and then the truth side says, you know what, I'm jumping into the river, and I either say you trust God to navigate this and give you wisdom, or you don't. And I choose to trust the Lord that He will show us how. And I'm quite sure there's a ton of people who are waiting to, and already to come alongside and jump in and do that too. So I don't know. I think for me, that would be it.
So let me tell you that I actually think that you guys are better suited to that than I am. And just because of your gift set and the history and the background that you've had with church planting and the kinds of heavy relationship building stuff, I've always been I think a lot of it had, if I can blame mental health, I will, but a lot of it, I have my own insecurities and stuff, and they bleed out in lots of different ways, and they have over the years. But that's one thing I'm excited about, though, for the people of Northview. Having known you guys and knowing the kinds of things you're going to bring to the church is a really heavy dose of community and genuine love and interest in people. I had the interest, but I just couldn't get over myself quickly enough. So I'm looking forward to that for folks.
Hey, no, I appreciate that, Jeff, but I would turn it back at you, and so maybe ask the question, what if you were the new guy, or you're advising the new guy, and we did know the church, so what's the good and the bad? But also just saying, every leadership transition, there's going to be differences between the leaders. I come into this recognizing you and I are different people for sure, but looking at the massive shoes that I have to fill, and just knowing from the get-go, I'm not going to fill Dr. Jeff Bucknam's shoes. Like, I'm not a medical doctor. Like, what do I know about vaccines and all that? Like, you have such expertise in all those areas of your doctorate degree. No, but I think, like, honestly, the theological depth and training, I've said to many people, you're like this walking encyclopedia of ancient church history, and you name some heretic from the 2nd century and you know what it's all about. And I'm like, I'll go look that up and find out. I'll get back to you in a couple of days. So I think the depth that you have taken Northview to in both theology classes, what are small group, with 40, 60 people, 6 a.m. in the atrium, to the pulpit ministry, to the Immerse program. You have grown this church deep. And that part, I'm like, that's not my bailiwick, but I can work the foyer, so I'll shake babies and kiss hands and that.
Yeah, but the thing that we have in common, Mark, is that both of us are well acquainted with our failings and our limitations, and neither of us are so excited about our name being in lights that we can't share our ministry with others. In fact, I think both of us, is what drives us forward is the idea that other people will get an opportunity to minister and actually see the Lord use them in pretty profound ways. And so, I don't know, that's part of the reason why I'm excited for the church as well, is that I mean the leadership development edge and that kind of thing is just going to go from strength to strength, I think, in the years ahead. And I think people at Northview need to also understand that, and I think they do, that we have a lot of really capable communicators at the church.
Yeah,
I mean, like a lot of people that they're only going to hear from more and more, and you're going to see, especially these young guys, they're going to see them grow and grow and grow. And that I just think that there's a lot. The ministry that I had was a particular brand, but they're going to get a different kind. But there'll be somebody who's like me who comes in with a little bit more of the intellectual edge or whatever, and then other people, other preachers will scratch a different itch. So it's going to be great. That broad preaching, the stable of preaching, is going to be a really healthy thing for people's discipleship, I think.
Yeah, it's awesome. Hey, so you're supposed to be leading the interview, but let me jump in.
Okay, go ahead.
After 15 long years, what are you going to miss the most about Northview?
Oh my gosh, the people, obviously, just the many different people who I've come to love. We're all so quirky. I'm going to miss some quirky people. And honestly, I am going to miss the staff of the church a lot. You come to love these people, and it just the relationships, the fact that we've done ministry out of relationship. There's a guy who I once heard years ago say, "You should never do ministry with your friends," and I think that's a stupid comment. His comment was, well, because you might have to fire your friends, and I understand what he's trying to say. But I just can't imagine doing ministry with people who aren't my friends and developing a really strong...
It'd be like working with Freddie every other day.
I know, totally. But I am going to miss those relationships a lot. I'm going to miss the planning for sermons with the people that we plan from, the whole room full of people. I'm going to miss actually a lot of the interns, as crazy as that sounds. I find them to be delightfully challenging. Sometimes not so delightful, but like they force you to be on your game. And I'm really looking forward to seeing Harvest be filled with interns and be filled with young people who are learning the craft of pastoral ministry. Just so that, because that's where I get most of my energy from, is seeing them flourish, like that kind of thing. So I will, it's going to be the people that I miss the most.
So the second half, of course, is what won't you miss?
Right now, the honest answer is I'm having a little bit of difficulty with some of the Canadian government approach to some things. So I'm not saying that is a cause or anything for me leaving, but you're asking me on a day that I'm like, oh, it just some of it seems very heavy-handed and not really very concerned about civil liberties, and that's hard for me to take, because I think civil liberties are good for everybody. But so I don't think I'll miss that very much, and I won't miss ICBC. Like, honestly, I am looking forward to saying I cancel my car insurance with you. But it's funny. I honestly miss the Vancouver area, and I'm going to miss the city and Abbotsford and knowing the area, and miss being known and that kind of thing, and jumping into a very, very much larger setting in Chicago. Although there's a benefit to that, because you can go places, I think, in a larger city and not be known by everyone. Whereas here, man,
aren't there like 11 million people in the greater Chicago area?
Something like that. Like everybody knows what I buy at Costco here.
Right.
So like I don't think I've ever been to Costco in my time that somebody from Northview hasn't been there. They're like, why is there so much Diet Pepsi in his cart? Does he need that much Diet Pepsi?
Yeah, that's right. Well, hey, you can come back, right?
Okay.
And so you're going to be preaching here in October, and in February, we've already committed to that, right?
Yes.
You agreed to that?
Oh, yeah. Listen, anytime you ever want me to come back to Vancouver, to this area, I will happily re-indulge my Canadian citizenship in Canada. In fact, I probably think I'm going to have a little bit of injection of Canadiana every once in a while, just to remember that the whole world isn't as crazy as the States is.
Yeah, can you get poutine in Chicago?
I don't. I think you can get anything in Chicago, but it's funny. It's because I'm Canadian now. When I go to Chicago and I see a Canadian, there's like this massive commonality now. Like, yeah. And so there's a guy on staff there who's from Toronto, and I look past that, but he's great. But we talk about Canadian stuff, and it's really lovely. And I've already enjoyed chatting with him. And there's a few others who've been, man, I've been to Vancouver. My cousin lives there, or whatever. And I will very much have to come back and be a part of all of that. And who knows? Maybe one day I will return triumphant and become the premier of British Columbia. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Can you imagine? Oh my goodness. Yeah. All right, ICBC. I can tell you right now, ICBC be done. If I was a premier, they'd be done.
Right.
Okay, so I have other questions for you. What are you most looking forward to?
Me or my wife?
Yeah, sure, both.
Oh my goodness, Jeff. You know what? Honestly, dovetail and piggyback onto your government restrictions and the pandemic. What I am most looking forward to is a packed house, full worship, no masks, people singing at the top of their lungs, and full band. You know, the smoke and light show, like, is, classic Northview, like, just pump the thing full of smoke.
You might as well. Listen, at this point, go for it.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to ask any questions. They're going to be like, I don't care. As long as we're together and we're singing.
Yeah. Like, I've got this hope and dream that the light switch is going to just flick back on and we're automatically back to full. And I think we all know that that's not going to happen that way, more than likely. Even if they lifted all restrictions immediately, there are going to be people for any number of reasons who choose to, reintegrate slowly. And so I wonder about that, but man, am I really longing for that day when you've got, whatever we got. If we got 1,100 seats in there, that every single seat is full, and we're like, all right, lift up the name of Jesus, open your Bibles, and that'll be awesome.
Yeah. And Karolyn, looking forward to?
Yeah, the same.
Yeah.
I think
gathered church.
I'm looking forward to. I really truly believe that this is a Joseph moment, and in our church history, that what maybe the enemy intended as evil, God intended for good. And so I'm really excited to see God peel back the curtain on this, and I'm really looking forward to that. Yeah.
So let me jump into that. So this is my last big question for you. How do you guys think that the post-COVID church will be different than the pre-COVID church? And in order to answer that, I'm assuming you're going to have to tell us, like, what have we learned both about the church and its state in society, and what is good about the church and what is not so good about the church? Like, what have we learned through this? What has the Lord revealed through this particular providence?
Yeah, I'd love to wrestle that with you back and forth, Jeff, see what you think. I think we've learned a lot. I think we're learning about our people, how they respond, because, as you well know and our elders know, as we've navigated our way through this thing, we have ticked people off on the two ends of the spectrum. So we've had people really angry with us that we have opened at all, and that we've been irresponsible in bringing people back too quickly, and why are you doing that, and don't you care about...
I had several emails from other pastors, and several congregants who were very angry at the early part of the pandemic that we were not requiring masks to be worn.
Right.
So in other words, we weren't going beyond the rules set by the provincial health authority, but they said it was irresponsible and blood on our hands.
Yep.
And they were saying to me, "Oh, we're not going to give money to Northview anymore because of that."
Yep.
So, yep.
And then the opposite extreme, which you know as well. So we also had the voices, or like, pick some other example, John MacArthur or the guy up in Edmonton, and why aren't you doing what those guys do? And stick it to the man and stand up against the government, and we should just be meeting. And so it's interesting when you and I, we did this where we would compare two emails side by side at the complete polar opposites in their approach. And then knowing that the majority in the middle, might share some of those concerns, but basically we're just praying for the leaders and wanted us to do what was right. And I think coming out of this, what I hope and pray is that we haven't done damage to one another in, the throwing stones at the opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
And it's easy to type an email or throw a post up on social media. It's another thing to sit next to that person in a worship service and then go, oh, yeah, you were the comment after my comment on the Northview feed that was opposite of mine. What's that going to be like?
Yeah.
So,
well, it's funny, or not funny, this is part of the reason why, if there has been one refrain you've heard from me and from other, I think, leaders at Northview, it has been Christian charity, Christian charity,
Yes.
Christian charity.
yeah,
And what's even though we've received letters and comments from both sides of both sides of the debate,
yeah,
over how the pandemic should have been handled, or how masks should have been handled, or how vaccines should have been handled, we've received, from both sides on all of that. What's interesting is that there's a huge similarity between the people who are writing from both sides of it, and that is that both of them are heavily convinced that their perspective is right.
yes,
And that, lives are at stake, or heavily, the people who are like, you should never be involved with a vaccine clinic, are saying that this vaccine's not tested, it's not, it's emergency thing, and we don't know enough about it, and, you have blood on your hands. And like I said a minute ago, it's the same argument that the other side is having. You didn't do mass enough, or you're open at all, you have blood on your hands. And so all along, we've been trying to say, look, I get it. You're very, very passionate. People have their rationale and reason for believing what they believe, but we've tried to argue repeatedly that it is honestly, by definition, a disputable matter. Nobody knows exactly what the vaccine does. Nobody knows exactly how COVID should have been dealt with or not dealt with, or how dangerous it was, or how not. Nobody actually knows exactly. It's going to be like 10 years from now, somebody's going to write like the definitive paper on it, maybe.
yeah,
But it'll take 10 years, and then we'll know. But our goal all along has basically been to tell people, come on, like our commonality in the gospel, our brothers and sisterhoodness, whatever, that's not a word, but the fact that we're family is a big deal. And we are going to sit together and in church, and we're going to have to love each other, because that's what defines us.
yep,
There's a thing that happened in the early church that's interesting. When you'd have these different emperors who'd come in, and one emperor is really favorable to Christians, and then others would be really not favorable. And so it was common that what would happen is one really favorable emperor would die, and then his son would come in, and he wanted to return the land to its paganism. And because he wanted to return the land to the paganism, he would really persecute the churches. And there were people in the churches who were like, I can't deal with that. And so then they would, pinch their incense to Caesar or whatever, and they deny Christ in the eyes of all the others. Mm-hmm. And some of those people who weren't denying Christ, their brother or sister their actual physical brother and sister remained faithful and got killed for it. But then the next, 10 years later, the next emperor was favorable to Christianity again, and then all of a sudden, all those people started coming back. The people who denied Christ are coming back to church now because it's safer, right? Mm-hmm. So now you got this weird moment where they're sitting next to each other in church. The guy who lost his physical brother, his biological brother, because his brother was unwilling to recant, sitting next to a guy who recanted and is still alive.
yeah, yeah.
And so what do you do now? And the early church had to deal with that a lot. And their big push was love.
Yeah, for sure.
And so
I think if we move beyond, the immediate response to the pandemic and, what we've been talking about now, I think another really interesting thing is going to be to see what the Spirit of God has been doing in people's lives in the midst of this. So, we've met just last weekend. I met a family. They're brand new to Northview. Now, they happen to have moved to Abbotsford during the pandemic, and they're looking for a church. They found us online, heard we're having outdoor services, and they're like, hey, it's our first weekend here. And I know a number of our pastors have bumped into people who are brand new to Northview during the pandemic. And then I think another, really interesting cultural phenomenon, if you will, just the sign of the times that we're in, is the rising the rising tide on the nuns, those who used to be Christians, but now they claim no religious affiliation. And we just preached through Malachi, that chunk in Malachi where the Lord says to Malachi, I wish somebody would just shut the temple doors, just close it down. I remember preaching that text years ago and going, hey, that might be the best thing for the church ever if the government would just come chain the doors for just give us 6 weeks where they lock us out.
How about a year and a half?
Now we're 15 months into this thing. And I think we're going to see both, Jeff. I think we're going to see people pounding down the doors of the church to get back. They so desperately want to be with God's people. Yeah. And then I think, honestly, some of those people who have been Christian in name only, it was just a routine, a ritual, for whatever reason, they'd come to church maybe once a month or something. They've now had 15 months of not being able to gather. And I would be surprised if we've not, in the midst of that, weeded out some of those who are not truly followers of Christ and they won't come back. But I'm really curious to see who shows up as a result of this. Yeah. That in the midst of the pandemic, the Spirit of God was stirring in their heart. They were feeling empty. They were feeling isolated. Yeah. Their spiritual needs were being stirred. And I mean, there's been a ton of, ton of people listening to Northview, more people listening to Northview now online and Northview TV than we ever had attend in-person services.
Oh, yeah. There's
So if even a good portion of them showed up any weekend, we're not going to have room for them.
Oh, no. Yeah, you're into the 9,000 and 10,000 range in terms of how many people are probably listening on a weekend. But what you just said is a very, I think that the church from time to time has these winnowing moments. This is probably one of them, right? Where the Lord, I guess the right thing to say is weeds out those whose hearts are not genuinely there. And that's not a bad thing, by the way. It's a bad thing from our perspective, but from when it comes to the power and the future of the church, a church that is filled with committed people whose lives are marked by their love for each other and the gospel are going to have a huge impact on a community, far more than the church that is filled with people who you don't really know if they're Christian or not, and they look just like the society around them and all that kind of thing. So the Lord has accomplished his will in all of it. It's just, we're just like all the other times in history, we're kind of holding our hands up and going, I don't know how you're going to pull this one together, Lord. But he will. And probably we'll see some of the evidence of it in the days to come.
Yeah, we will. We will.
Mark, do you have any questions for me? You've been asking them throughout, so I don't need you to ask any more. But, it is my podcast. So.
It is. It is your podcast. Jeff, what was it? I don't know if you've talked about this on previous podcasts. Maybe other guys have asked you the question. What was it about Harvest Bible Chapel that intrigued you enough? I know over the years, every pastor gets phone calls, every 6-8 months, some church will be, hey, we're looking for a pastor. And typically, you've told me this, your answer is, yeah, not interested, loving it, Northview. Harvest Bible Chapel, a headhunter got your name and number, something intrigued you. What was that?
The mess of it. I've told that to people a lot, and I don't know if everybody believes me or not, but it's part of the way I'm wired. I actually found Northview to be a real draw to me when I was first coming there. We didn't have a lead pastor, and I remember talking to some of the people on the search committee who were looking for when they were looking for a young adults pastor. They kept kind of apologizing, say, "Oh, we don't have a lead pastor. The church has gone through this difficult state, and I'm not sure. You just don't come in with your eyes wide open." And I was like, "Yeah, sure, whatever. All of that's great. I feel like I work best with things that I can help, and so." Honestly, Harvest is just that, a little bit on steroids. There have been moments in the last little bit that I have looked at the mountain that it is and thought, oh dear, which is not uncommon for me though. I make decisions all the time, and then about 15 minutes into it, I say to my wife, oh dear, what have I done? But you know what? I think the Lord obviously is going to use me for whatever it is that he wants to see happen there, and so I'm game, and I'm into it. And I was just thinking today, in fact, that ministry is not that complicated when you really get down to it. As a pastor, your job is to shepherd the flock through sound preaching and teaching and loving them enough to tell them the truth, and just consistently getting to know people in relationships and trying to get to know them where they're at, help to disciple them into the next stage of their Christian journey. And I mean, sometimes we think of it way bigger. Oh, well, what about this big public thing or these big newspaper calls or whatever? You know what? It does none of that's really that important. What's important is just discipling people in front of you and being faithful in the pulpit and preaching from house to house consistently, the whole counsel, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So, hey, on a truly just the personal note, I understand you've bought a home and it's in the neighborhood with Barack and Michelle. So going to be neighbors there. That's
one
great.
Of those comments is true and the other is not. Barack and Michelle are coming over our first week there, but we did not buy a house in their neighborhood.
A little too far from the church.
It's a little bit too, well, there's several campuses of the church, so we could have lived a lot of places. So we chose to live in a place right in the middle of a lot of them.
Yeah.
So, which is be great. The community's really lovely. And I mean, it's a beautiful Midwestern home on I don't know if it's from the house was built in the 60s, but it's kind of funky. It's got different levels and weirdness. Oh, we're excited about it.
Like the Brady Bunch. So one of those?
Kind of, you know what? No, not like that. But
okay.
but kind of, you drop down into this living area and then yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
So I'm excited about it. My first thing my kid said is, "Dad, we have to get a hot tub." And I was like, yeah, okay. But the problem is that I'm not going to take care of the hot tub. And that's usually not a good sign, right? Because it'll be filled with algae. Ever seen those hot tubs that are just left on the side of the street and you look in there and go, how did this thing get this way? My fear is that I'm the answer to that question.
The Bucknam.
Like, how did this get this way? Jeff Bucknam, that's the reason.
So I do have a serious question though for you. Have you ever visited Chicago in February?
No, I have not, but I have been to Chicago in
December. Okay.
Which was not that, actually was cold, but not like bitterly, horribly January, February cold. No. And I am mentally prepared for it.
No, you're not.
Can guarantee you that I am not physically prepared
you're not.
for it.
You and I have a mutual friend that I won't name on this podcast, but he's from Manitoba. And he formerly served on the elders team here, so you can probably imagine this good brother that you and I traveled with. And he was laughing, saying Jeff has no idea what he's getting into.
No, I don't.
In the winters of Chicago.
No, I don't. People there have told me.
We should schedule a podcast now.
February,
like 8 months from now.
Oh yeah, totally.
In the 40 below zero, windy day.
Yeah.
And let's do. Hey Jeff, are you glad you decided to go to Chicago now?
And I'll tune in from Arizona, where I will be taking my holidays. Yeah. There's one of the pastors at the church there is from Texas, and he said, "I hate snow." And I'm like, "Dude, what are you doing here?" And he said, "Look, I live here because Lord led me here through business and stuff like that. And listen, if I'm capable of staying in this area with the 2.5 months of awful weather, then anybody can do it." So, I'm banking on that.
Yeah, it'll give you a reason to go south in the winter.
Well, that's why you need to invite. I think you already did. You're inviting me in February to come back
back to the balmy temperatures of Abbotsford.
Yeah. Mark, Karolyn, it has been a delight to talk to you. Thank you so much. I'm excited, actually, about the future of Northview, and I've been thanking God a lot lately that in his kind providence, he has brought you to us, and he has given you a heart to see what is ahead for this church. And so you have my great thanks for being willing to say yes to it. Because, the biggest thing that a pastor goes through, the challenge is that, you love the church that you've pastored and you get worried about the next person thing. Like, is all the stuff that you've done going to be undone? Mm-hmm. But I am thrilled that I really think that, the strengths of Northview are going to be even greater in the days ahead than they have been in the past.
Yeah,
so, good on you.
I appreciate it. And I'm sure you didn't listen to my message last weekend, but I said to the church, pastor's in a dilemma. Do you stay so long that you get ineffective and people are glad to see you go? Or do you leave when things are going well and then people are ticked off while you're leaving? And somewhere in the middle of that, you listen to God's call in your life. And, just to affirm that, man, it's a privilege not only to follow you, but to bless you as you guys go. And also to know that the door is wide open at any point in time. Like, you guys can come back to Northview at any point in time, and that there's going to be a welcome here, that the church is like, those Bucknam years, we love those years. And that's a blessing for you guys, because to be able to leave after 15 years of effective ministry and know that there's no skeletons in the closet, and people are going to be like, yeah, I hope that guy never comes back again. You're like, no, you're going to be welcome here at any point in time.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing that needs to probably happen more in the Fraser Valley, in my opinion.
It does.
In the Lower Mainland, there's way too many examples of pastors leaving and the churches not wanting them to come back, or the pastor being so angry that... Anyway, it's probably not just Lower Mainland, it's everywhere. It's good for pastors and churches to love each other even beyond the time they spend together. Anyway, thanks so much for being here. God bless you guys. God bless the rest of you. We'll talk to you next time.
We have one final episode of Conversations with Jeff coming up in 2 weeks' time. It'll be a bit of a different format than the podcasts you've grown accustomed to here, with a little bit more of a roundtable discussion with some fun and familiar voices. So stay tuned. That'll be coming out in a couple weeks' time. And we think it'll be really good for you to catch that one when we release it.
Thanks for listening to Conversations with Jeff. Make sure you subscribe to catch up on all upcoming episodes. So until next time, love God, do what you want, and don't be stupid.